Everyone hits a bump in the road. What do you do with it? Be inspired as we explore the ways people experience, navigate, and manage the ups and downs and twists and turns in this road trip called life. Welcome to another episode of Bump in the Road. The basic podcast is always free. We also have a premium subscription called Bump 2 that lets you listen in on extended behind-the-scenes conversations with our guests. Check it out at www.bumpintheroad.us. Terry Chase hit a serious bump in the road when her bicycle was run over by a drunk driver in a large SUV. But Terry has the mindset of an athlete. The fact that she's now in a wheelchair is incidental to her spirit. Come join me. Be inspired to find the courage to step outside of your comfort zone and pursue your very best life. Terry, welcome to Bump in the Road. If you would, tell us your story.
Hi, Pat. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on this podcast. I really, really appreciate it. And I so love your Bump in the Road title. It actually kind of brings up a little bit of an emotion for me because I was hit by a drunk driver about almost 35 years ago. I was riding a bike in from the outskirts of Grand Junction, Colorado, which is in the Western Slope. And I hit a bump. And the bump was a big black Lincoln Continental came up behind me, hit me. My bike crunched underneath the front of the vehicle. I flew up on top of the vehicle. And at that moment, I was like, this is really bad. And he swerved. I hit the ground. And that's when I hit the big bump. I hit the road. And that's when I broke my back. It was considered a incomplete burst fracture. So that means that I have some movement and function below my injury, which I'm I feel very, very fortunate about. And so from that injury, from that bump in the road, it rendered me an incomplete paraplegic, meaning that I was going to be using a wheelchair and or crutches for the rest of my life, which I did. And anyway, so the stories in my book, Spoke by Spoke, which I know we'll get to in a bit, tell the story of that journey. So how's that?
Well, I thought Spoke by Spoke was absolutely terrific. And one of the things that really impressed me was somehow you managed to not let anything get in your way. Where did that come from?
Well, I was very motivated at the time of my injury to return to teaching. I was a middle school PE teacher here in Grand Junction, and our school, one of our students had completed suicide about a month before I got hurt. And I just felt so impelled to make sure that my students knew that there was another option. When things get bad, you don't just have to, complete suicide. There are other options. And I felt very, very committed to coming back to teaching, which I did. I was back teaching 5 months after my injury, teaching from a wheelchair. I got the kids involved. I spent the whole first week of school introducing the students to disability, my disability. I actually transferred out of my chair. I grabbed my stopwatch and said, okay, everybody gets 1 minute in Miss Chase's wheelchair. And I wanted them to experience the equipment I was using. I didn't want them to be afraid. And I wanted them to know that I could still be their teacher and I could still, boss them around and, hold the stopwatch and do the things that I love, which was getting kids active and out on the fields.
Losing your own ability to be active because you were quite an athlete how did you cope with that?
Yeah, and I just want to let people know that I did have struggles, and we'll certainly get to those in a bit. But how I coped with it was I looked at everything I had to do in my rehab as an athletic thing. So the physical therapy that I received, the occupational therapy I received, even the point of choosing my wheelchair, one day I had to with my therapist, I had to sit and order a wheelchair, and that can be really devastating for people, especially athletes, because I was used to ordering bikes and buying stuff, athletic stuff. But so I was like, all right, I'm gonna approach the ordering of this chair from that mindset, which is I'm an athlete, so I want the best performing chair I can get, within reason. I want the color that my bike was, a hot red. I wanted to be performance oriented. Now, at that time, that was 35 years ago. We didn't have that many big selections of chairs, but I could get a rigid frame with the cherry red or the apple red color with smaller casters in the front so I could maneuver quickly. And, it would be lightweight. So that's how I approached it. Even in physical therapy, I remember one time the therapists were like, okay, it was great. It was great rehab. I was at Craig Hospital in Denver, which I love, changed my life. Um, One time the therapists are like, okay, we're going to go do our push around the block and then we're going to come back and do this and that. And I said, can we throw out some cones? Can we just put some cones out? I need some cones. Like I'm in a gym, give me some cones to maneuver around. So, stuff like that. And when I was in the rehab program, the probably the thing that saved my life was recreation therapy. And these are the people who really work with patients around getting back to the things they love, whether that be shopping, fishing. I went water skiing, before I was discharged, and I call that my claim to fame. Um, it's recreation therapy that got me out of the hospital, that let me know that I could still be a person beyond that bed, and even in a wheelchair. It's like, so what? Let's just go for it. And I never heard, no, you can't do that. I always heard, well, let's give it a try. And I was like, all right, let's give it a try. Let's do it.
The mindset of athletics has so much to teach us in so many aspects of life, don't you think?
It really does. It really does. And I think I've continued with that mindset. I think mindset's a big thing in this whole ordeal, Pat, for everybody. And one of the big mindsets and one of the big philosophies that has stayed with me throughout my entire time is the philosophy of Outward Bound. And Outward Bound is an outdoor wilderness program that works. And I was an instructor for Outward Bound that really challenges people beyond their self-perceived limits. And one of the sayings and one of the bylines of Outward Bound is to serve, to strive, and not to yield. And I really kept that motto going for me all the time. And I've woven the Outward Bound spirit. I've woven Outward Bound activities into my subsequent teaching as a nursing professor, in coaching work that I do, sessions, experiential sessions that I do with folks. So I really do believe that the best learning is through experience and experiential learning to assist people in going beyond those self-perceived limits.
Experiential learning really sticks with us. One of the things that you wrote in your book, you mentioned, what is is the importance of taking that first step.
Yeah. Yeah.
It can be so hard, though. How do you help people get to that point? Because you're really asking them to step outside their comfort zone, and that is not very comfortable sometimes.
No. And that's why it's called the comfort zone, because it feels good. It feels good. Hey, it's like squishy. Yeah, I love it. So I really love that you brought that up, because that's another thing that I did, that I pull from my Outward Bound experience, which is, if you think about a bullseye, and in the middle of the bullseye, there's the comfort zone. It's the smaller circle right in the middle. We feel good. We're familiar. We know what we're doing in there. Just outside the comfort zone is what I would call the growth zone. So when we take a step, and this is one of the things that I really work with people, is you don't have to take a gigantic leap. I'm not asking people to jump off a cliff or, whatever. No. But is there one small step? Is there one little 3-foot toss that could be made to assist you in moving into growth? Now, if people take too large of a step, they'll end up in that outer ring, which is called the panic zone. There is no learning that happens in the panic zone. So I encourage people to, take a breath, and let's just take one small step outside that comfort zone, which, for me, I didn't, sometimes I took small steps, but sometimes I just leapt. Like in the chapter in the book of Something Remarkable is that day that I went water skiing. And I really was not a water skier before I got hurt. I had skied a few times, but I just remembered, like, oh my God, I just had a lot of muscle pain for days after I went water skiing. So when the recreation therapist said, hey, we're going to go next Tuesday. You want to go? We'll check it out with your doctor. I said, oh, okay, we'll see what the doc says. Doc says, well, you get your brace off in a few days. So yeah, you'll be able to go. I'm like, all right, then I'll go. So, I mean, it was like I just wanted to try things. I wanted to know that I could do stuff. And the only way I could find out was to take a step. And if I had said, no, no, really, I'm not really a water skier, then I would have missed out on consecutive years, 30 consecutive years of water skiing. I never missed a summer of water skiing since that first time.
I think when it comes to taking a step, you have to ask yourself, what do I have to lose? And the
Yeah.
reality is, for most of us, we have so much to gain.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
I just was looking for the quote from Outward Bound. I have it here somewhere in my notes. It's such an incredible quote, and it has to do with adventure. I
Yeah.
think having a sense of adventure is just critical to life.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is. And I think, dealing with this disability, it's like, well, what can I learn from this? When I was a PE teacher, we didn't have at that time of the public school system, we didn't really have adaptive PE teachers. So I had a few kids with disabilities in my class, and I'm like, you know what? I think I'm just going to take my planning period and see if I can gather those, 3 or 4 kids. Like some of them had, well, all of them had mobility issues of some sort, and I would just gather those kids up and go, okay, let's make up our own PE class. And I would do that with the kids. So I had some sense of, well, we gotta figure out ways to help people. And so when I got hurt, it was like, all right. And oh, this is another big thing. I'm sure you read the thing about tennis. You probably read that one, the
Yeah.
three little lessons from a tennis ball. So when I went back to teaching, another thing that I did in my rehab was I started to play tennis. Now, tennis was something I really could not stand. I was like, I am not doing tennis. I'm not doing it. So I'm laying in bed one night at the hospital, and my roommate, who I still am in touch with, she's not really athletic, and she's kind of a blonde, kind of ditzy girl. But we had a great time together. And she said, I'm going to tennis, and I'm like, okay, whatever. So I'm laying in bed, and I'm thinking, I can't let that ditzy blonde go down to tennis, and I'm laying here in bed. So I haul myself up, get in my chair, and I go down to the gym. And the recreation therapist puts a racket in my hand and says, "Okay, just try this. Just see what happens. Just want me to bounce you the ball, see what happens." So I swung, I hit the ball, and it was like a light bulb went off in my head, and I was like, "Wow, I can do this." So she hit me another one, and another one, and another. I'm like, "Wow." So that led to me going, I can play tennis now. I'm going to play tennis. And you know what? This is a game I can play with my kids. So I go back to teaching. And even though Miss Chase had never done tennis before at all in our curriculum, I'm like, all right, everybody, we're playing tennis. So every opportunity I had to play tennis in the gym, I even walked the kids down to a local tennis court. We did other things, but tennis was one of those sports that I could do with the kids. It was like, oh, I'm playing again. So you're right about that sense of adventure. It's more of a curiosity, like what will this be like? And just getting a taste of it really helped me so much.
Well, I also think in sports, you learn to lose in order to win. I mean, you have to practice. You do not get
Yeah,
every shot or every point. And that is, I think, part of the value of playing sports.
yeah, yeah. The reason why I'm chuckling is, I played competitive wheelchair tennis for 16 years. Soon after I, got out of rehab and everything. And so I had a great time. I was competitive. I played in tournaments. At that time, there weren't many women in the sport. So I played a lot of guys. I had a lot of trophies. And then in the early 2000s, I took a break because I was starting to get into some other things. And tennis was really, I mean, I loved it. Great. But it was like, I can't do a weekend of tennis and then do all these other things. So I gave up tennis until just recently. And just recently, I got back into tennis, and I want to play on a league team. Some of your listeners may know about the USTA leagues. So in
Hmm.
my town, there's leagues. There's women. I want to play with other women. I just they're able bodied. So me in the chair. So I needed to get a little bit more skill base. I needed to ramp up a little bit. So I started working out with some wheelchair tennis groups. I went and found a coach that just kind of helped tune me up. And then last weekend, I participated in my first wheelchair tennis tournament in 20 years. And so I hadn't played. I mean, it's been so cold here. I hadn't even been on a court, but I got out there and I started playing. Well, I played 10 matches in 2.5 days. I beat, I won, I did beat another guy in my division to get the third place consolation. But what I realized was, oh my God, look at the growth of this sport in 20 years. I mean, it was huge. There were 46 people in wheelchairs. We had multiple divisions. We had juniors. We had 3 sponsored teams from universities. And I had to remind myself, like, wait a second, I'm being really fearful about losing. I was like, oh my God, I'm so afraid I'm gonna lose. And then I had a quick just email interchange with that coach and said, I'm freaking out. He said, well, you really got to play to win. He said, if you're so afraid of losing, that's what you're going to do. I'm like, oh, okay. So the next day, I'm back in the court, like, okay, play to win, play to win, play to win. And you know what? I won. I mean, I still lost a few, but it was like, oh my God. And but there's so much from that weekend that I'm going to continue to do some writing about. But it was like 3 more lessons from a tennis ball. Play to win was
Mhm.
one of them. Yeah.
You, in your book, you also talk a little bit about the meaning of a seam on a tennis ball. Would you share that?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to how I experiential learning, because I think sometimes people really think that, oh, I heard it once, I got it, or I read that book once, I got it, or I took that class, I got it. And really, learning is about, so if you visualize a tennis ball and it's got that rubber seam that kind of goes around it in kind of a helix fashion, and I would use it in my work with healthcare providers around teaching, because healthcare providers have to do a lot of teaching, but nobody really teaches them how to teach. So one of the things I would do is, okay, let's look at my theory of my tennis. I call it my tennis ball theory of learning. And I said, put a dot on the seam. Now, what I'd like you to do is, I kind of talk out loud about, maybe we were teaching a particular thing, and we progressed through it, and we were all around, go all around the ball, and pretty soon we're back at the dot. I'm like, okay, so we're back at the dot. It doesn't mean we're done. It just means that learning is continuous, and that as we teach our patients, as I work with my nursing students, as I work with the coaching groups and the individuals that I have, is that it's okay. We're going to revisit those things, but more than likely at a different level, and we may have to revisit several times to really get it, and then to really get it into our bones, get it into our brain memory, and work on that neuroplasticity that all of us have, which is our brains can certainly expand.
Yeah, no, I think learning and skill building, is an iterative endeavor, in everything, no matter
Hmm.
what you do. Um, and I think that courage is one of those things that we can also build strength in. Um,
Hmm.
how is how would you define courage?
Well, there's lots of different things, lots of different ways to define it. I go back to a very early time in my life, and I think you asked me early on, how did I get through this, or how did I do this? Well, I had an experience in my life as a young girl where my mom decided that leaving her marriage and leaving our home in Long Island, New York, was something she needed to do. And we basically all got on a Greyhound bus in the middle of the night and took a 4-day trip to Reno, Nevada, unbeknownst to my dad or any other family member. So in real time, in modern times, it would be called kidnapping. But back then it was, she took the kids. But I remember distinctly that first step up onto the metal step of the bus, that Greyhound bus. And it was like that took courage. Well, it took courage for my mom to do what she did, even though it may not have been the smartest thing to do, but she had to do what she did. But for me, it was like I took that first step. I took a step onto this big, silver step onto a bus, and I just did it. I didn't know exactly where we were going. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I did it anyway. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is that courage is, you're afraid, you're fearful, you don't really know, but you know what? You just go ahead and do it anyway. And I think that's, for me, how courage has been.
Yeah, and I think that by taking that first step, you will open doors that you can never imagine.
Yeah, yeah, Absolutely.
I wanted to ask you a little bit. You've been just a fan of education. And one of the things you did is you went to the University of Santa Monica to study spiritual psychology. Would you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So yeah, so after I got hurt, I really did up my ante around learning and all of that. And let me back up just a little bit, and I'll get to that in a minute, Pat. But first off, out of the box, I did get a master's degree in exercise physiology because I really had a question of how do I stay healthy. I was a I love physical fitness. I want to stay in shape. Therapy taught me a lot, but nobody taught me how to stay in shape. So I got that master's degree, and I found out that, well, we're kind of studying it, so you might want to just spend a lot of time in the library reading what the current research is. And while all my classmates are running and jumping and doing all these things, I'm like, okay, I'm in the library. But that was because I was looking for things on the physical plane. The next level of education for me was a doctorate in nursing. And what led me to that was I was really curious about what made me feel better. Because when I was a patient, I realized that there were certain people who helped me feel better and helped me heal. And so I was curious about that. So I had heard about the theory of human caring, which is a major theory in nursing, developed by Dr. Gene Watson. And there was a nursing doctorate program in Denver that was based on the theory of human caring. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go there. Of course, I didn't even think that's one of those things about, I wasn't a 3-foot toss. I'm going to enter nursing school. I didn't even give any thought. And in my book, Flinging Forward gives a really great, I talk about that. But I was like, okay, I'm going to go to nursing school. Well, I didn't get accepted the very first time, but I did get accepted the second time. So I completed a 4-year doctorate in nursing, became an RN, did all my clinicals, did everything, which we did. So that was on the healing, kind of what I would call the mental emotional plane of healing and learning. So that was good. It was like, okay, so that's a theory. How do we put that into practice? And so that's when my experiential learning came in. I developed quite a lot of sessions and work around that. But then I was also going through my own therapy to really work out some of the issues around my injury and before, with a woman who was a therapist, and had received her degree in spiritual psychology through the University of Santa Monica. And I just got really intrigued again with the spiritual plane and about how, there's this purpose of me on earth and discovery of that, and working through that and bringing that spirituality to my life, was something I was really interested in. It helped me, it helped me so much. I was like, what, I want to do that. So I went again into school and completed it was actually a 3-year master's degree in spiritual psychology with a emphasis in consciousness, health, and healing. And it was about really working with myself and others on the spiritual plane.
You mentioned consciousness. How would you define that?
Well, I think for me, it's consciousness is about and I talk about this a little bit in my book. I experienced it probably before I really knew what it was, but that deep listening, that deep listening of what, because there's a point in my book where I talk about the edge of dark, and I was not at a happy place a few times. I mean, a few times, and thought about, rolling off the edge of a big mountain or a big canyon. And, then I backed up and I was like, okay, what is there? What is there for me? So there's more to life than just what we think and what we do. There's this consciousness, there's this energy that is available if I choose to wake up and utilize it. And I'm not awake all the time. I'm certainly not like, conscious greatness. Every once in a while I fall asleep and, hit more bumps in the road. But I think it's about listening deeply.
One of the other things you wrote about that really intrigued me was that you did a lot of work with horses and a lot of Gestalt therapy. How
Mhm.
did talk about that a little bit? But what I'm really curious about is how did spiritual psychology and Gestalt therapy come together for you?
Well, I'm just like, well, I think I even say this in the book. Well, and then something else unfolded. and intrigued me about learning. And so Gestalt therapy is one of the works, one of the things that we learned in my spiritual psychology program. It's about dealing with the here and now, dealing with some parts of us that we've let go of or disowned. It's very much an experiential work, and so I went into training as a Gestalt therapist, and then from that, my teacher started a program where we work with horses, and horses really have such a great way of being present and being in the here and now. Like they're not worrying about what I did to them last week or what's for breakfast. They're just like here and now, what's going on, what's happening. They're very much nonverbal communicators, and they're very present oriented and very conscious of what's going on. So then so I was like, well, I can do that. I know I could ride horses. I know I can ride horses. And so the training for that was very strenuous because it was 50% horsemanship and learning to work with horses, which, when horses are in an arena in deep sand, it's really hard to get around. So lots of workarounds for me, lots of different things I had to do. But in that training program of working with horses, I had a session that I share in my book about anger. And, in Gestalt, as we learn to be Gestalt therapists, whether it's, in the room or with the horses, we have to do our own work. So I'm in the arena one day with a horse and one of my fellow peers, and I'm working with, I'm with the horse, and he's like, okay, so let's, go ahead. What's up for you today? And I'm like, and I was just really mad. I mean, I was angry because I'm in this deep sand. I can't move. And I'm frustrated again that, here I am, a student, can't, I perceive that I can't do anything right now. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm all right. I just kept saying I'm all right. And so I got the lead line in my hand, and I'm like, I kept like not attending to what was really going on for me. And so during that time of being not congruent, being disconnected from what was really feeling, the horse is like pulling away from me. Like, I'm not, the horse is just pulling away. I'm not interpreting it at all. The horse is pulling away. And I'm like, I'm getting madder and madder. And pretty soon my peer says, well, what about expressing how you're really feeling or something like that? And I hesitated, and I don't know, something just clicked. And I just started yelling and screaming about how mad I was. I was so frustrated. I'm stuck in the sand. I can't do anything. I feel so bad. I feel less than, just lots of anger. I mean, like good thing we were in a remote part of Colorado, because I was like screaming and yelling to the highest degree. And during that time of my expression of my emotion, it really brings up, my emotion now is, the horse came close to me, and the horse leaned into me, and the horse, let me be the way I was. And that was the turning point for me in knowing that working with people and horses had the potential to be so powerful because I experienced it. The horse was like, okay, I'm cool now with you, or something like that. But it was like, I got it that when I am congruent, when I am present with what's going on for me in all of life, but in particularly when working with horses, it can be a very, very impactful opportunity for growth. And it was, and it was amazing. It was really an amazing experience. And that's why I shared that in my book.
It kind of goes to another story you tell about the power of being seen. I think we all need to be seen.
Yeah.
And you talk about a gentleman in rehab named Bubba, and how you really gave him such a gift.
Yeah. Yeah. Bubba was one of those great guys. As a teacher, I'm sure a lot of your listeners are teachers or have been, and there's always a kid or two that sticks in your mind. Well, the only way I can describe Bubba's condition is that he was all messed up. I mean, he had a multitude of neurological problems, meaning he had some sensory issues, loss of sight, loss of his vocal cords were affected. He couldn't speak clearly. His mobility was impaired, so he couldn't walk. I mean, he was just all messed up from a variety of medical complications and missteps. So he was at our hospital because he qualified for brain injury and spinal cord injury. I at that time running the patient education program at Craig Hospital. And he comes into my class being pushed by his mom. Now, this is a 20, 22, 23-year-old kid being pushed by his mother. And something just clicked inside of me. And I was like, all right, Bubba, I'm so glad you're here. And I was like in his face. I'm like total big energy. And I said, I'm so glad you're here. I said, I know that communicating might be a little difficult for you. So I want you to be up here right close to me and give me a signal, thumbs up for it's okay, thumbs down, get it, or so, whatever. I said, but I want you to make sure that you stick with me through all of these classes. These are really important for you, really important for your independence, really important for your health. And, since your mom's here, we want to make sure she gets it too. And so I just treated him like a regular guy, I mean, it was, and after a while, I'm like, wait, what did I just do? I'm like, in this poor guy's face. So anyway, we go on and on. And Bubba makes some improvements. He starts to being able to, verbalize a little bit more, get up on his legs. I even took him out. I developed a program where I took the patients out for a 2-hour experience with the horses as preparation for going home, because, going home can be really scary. And so I thought, let's work with the horses. And this is my project. This is the project that I developed in my training. Let's go out and work with the horses to learn about safety and communication and confidence and all that. So Bubba went out, to the barn, and we had a great time with the horses. And he was a horse guy before, so it really turned him on and got him back to like, oh yeah, this is something I can do. I can get back with my horses. So anyway, a few months later, or maybe close to a year later, we get word that Bubba had unfortunately passed away from another medical complication. And his mom contacted me, or I contacted her, and I said, I'm so sorry, for Bubba. He was such a great guy. I loved him. I was so happy that he came to our hospital. I got to know him. She said, I want you to know Bubba really appreciated you. And all I could think of was, here I'm in this poor guy's face. She said, no, he really appreciated you because you really treated him like a normal guy. She said, you saw him, and it didn't matter that he was all messed up and his mouth was stuck open and he had to wear, fuzzy glasses and stuff like that. She said, but you reached inside his soul and you saw him as a guy, as a person, and he really appreciates you. So that's what I do, is I look into the eyes of people, and I look into their soul, and I get to the essence of who they are. I do that with my students, and sometimes they get kind of scared about that. They're used to like, artificial kind of surface stuff. And I'm like, I ain't that way. I want to get to your heart. I want to get to your soul, because that's the only way you're going to be able to be functional in the world and be a really good healthcare provider, is to be yourself and to be authentic.
Oh, that's so true in everything. Until you come to terms with yourself, you
Yeah.
can't possibly come to terms with somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things that has grown out of all this is that you definitely live a life of service. When did you realize that that was a path you were on?
Well, I think
And what
service has always been a part of my life. Even in high school, middle school, high school, I was on crisis phone lines and, helping people out. My mom did instill that in us, to always help others. So I think that's always been part of my gig. And I think even now, I mean, I think one of the things that I wrote in the beginning of the book was that there's such low expectation out there in the world towards people with disabilities. Like low expectation. Oh, don't worry, you don't need to do anything. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. So it's like, I give because that's what I do. And it helps me feel better. And I know by helping one other person, it certainly can make a better place.
You have a project called the Well-Being Project. And there are a number of points about it I'd love to have you talk about. But what I love about it, my favorite point, is inviting you to step into the bigger game and stop playing small.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And the only reason why I think I can teach it is because I had to learn that too. And I'm continuing to learn it, and so I'll talk a little bit about the Well-Being Project. Is that what you want me to do?
Yeah, well, the thing that's so interesting about stepping into a bigger game is that you're constantly challenging yourself to step out of the status quo, outside of your comfort zone.
Right.
And I think that the more you do that, the more you become capable of doing it.
Correct. Yeah, that is true. And I know for me, as I've continued to step out, continue to challenge, continue to take the first step, flinging forward, being hired at the hospital where I was a patient, leaving that and deciding to come back to the Western Slope of Colorado and apply for a nursing faculty job and attaining tenure within, a record short time period, and being a tenured professor, an associate professor of nursing, and then deciding, what, I'm gonna retire from that full time gig so that I can do more of my coaching, consulting, and speaking, and helping others step out of their comfort zones and be bigger than themselves. It goes back to that philosophy of Outward Bound, and I don't have the exact words in front of me, but Kurt Hahn, who is the founder of Outward Bound, said we have much more inside of us than we know. We're much
Yeah,
more
I have
yeah.
no, I have the quote here. I found it. There exists within everyone a grand passion, an outlandish thirst for adventure, a desire to live boldly and vividly through the journey of life.
Yeah. Yes, that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that. I love it,
and
but it's so
and
true. A
yeah,
life
and
without
whatever that
passion isn't worth it.
yeah, and whatever that is for people. And once again, it's like I don't want people to think, "Oh, I don't want to do it like Terry did." Well, please don't do it like I did. Do it like you want to do. What is your passion? I'm working with a client right now, one of the women in my well-being group. I have a small group of women that I work with for 5 months. We meet virtually once a month. We really work with the science of well-being, which are how do we bring more positive emotion, engagement, meaning, and accomplishment into our lives through practices, elements. I'm also infusing. We do a lot of work with strengths, and really leveraging our strengths as superpowers, um, and also spirituality. I mean, we're going to talk about spirituality, not from the religious standpoint, but from that higher consciousness, something bigger than ourselves. And so, one of the women in my group right now, what her ideal scene that she's working with for the next 5 months is to make her home a place of joy, of living, of health, and some place that she really feels that this is where she thrives. And that's fine. That's fine. I have another woman in my group who would really love to develop a program, an equine program, working with veterans and horses. And then there's another person in my group who is let me see. Who is just really looking for just getting back to her roots, getting back to her cultural roots, her Native American and Hispanic roots, through essential oils, through cultural practices, and through awareness. So it's really whatever it is people want in their lives. That's where I want to support them in attaining.
Yeah, I've gone off on some tangents and done some people would say wild things. Um, but I think that whatever you decide to do, whatever path you take, you learn so much about yourself if you're willing to be open to that.
Yeah, exactly.
If you could rewrite your story, would you?
I don't think so. I mean, I do miss. I mean, I'll be really honest. I do miss, climbing up a mountain. I do miss being able to go out to the barn and just, get on a horse myself without this production of, people and, equipment. But there's still a part of me that misses that, but it's not that I stop and I'm just like missing all of that. I feel like my life has grown exponentially since I got hurt, and I have accomplished more, and I have grown more on so many levels. I mean, I have my partner that I've been with for almost the whole 35 years of my injury. We have a solid relationship. We have adventured all over the world. I mean, my garage is called the Sports Castle because I have almost every piece of equipment to go out and do the things I want. Now, it didn't all happen at once. It was, again, slow, little incremental gains, that kind of stuff. Um, we say we have every fabric known to mankind, so there's no reason to not go out in inclement weather. So my life has grown so much. I feel so fortunate, because when I got hurt, I was kind of bored. I mean, I was bored as being a teacher. I didn't really know what I was going to do. So I might have just floated along in that sort of default future of a teacher, which, well, I'll go get it. I'll go get a master's degree. I'll be a principal, and then I'll retire at 30 years. Like I don't. That may have happened, but you know what? I'm glad it didn't, because I've got so much going on. I love my life, and I look forward to the time I have available ahead.
Thank you for listening. I hope you'll support this podcast by becoming a Bump 2 subscriber. Buy us a cup of coffee. It's your support that makes this podcast and website possible. I hope you found something in today's podcast that inspires you along your own life's path, because sometimes a bump in the road is actually a portal into a more conscious and meaningful life.